Why did every man in the helicopter fall silent the moment she touched the wound? The rotors screamed overhead, slicing the desert air into pieces. Dust swirled so thick it turned daylight into something brown and choking. Inside the helicopter, 8 SEALs sat strapped in, bruised, bleeding, hollow-eyed. No one spoke. No one needed to. They all knew how close it had been. Marcus Rivera pressed his shoulder into the cold metal wall as the aircraft lurched. Blood ran warm down the side of his face, sticky against his temple. Across from him, Jake Wilson lay on a stretcher, teeth clenched, hands shaking despite the morphine barely holding him together. His leg dressing was soaked through. Too much blood, not enough time. The mission wasn't supposed to go like this. It never was. Recon, in and out, quiet. Instead, 4 hours of gunfire in the mountains, radio silence, and the kind of chaos that made you forget your own name. 3 minutes, the pilot shouted. Marcus nodded without really hearing him. His eyes stayed on Wilson's leg, on the slow, terrifying seep of red. When the skids hit the ground, they moved on instinct. No shouting, no panic, just muscle memory. They hauled Wilson through the dust toward the medical tent, boots pounding earth that didn't care whether they lived or died. "Medic," Marcus yelled as they burst through the canvas flaps. And then stillness. She stepped out from behind a supply cabinet like she'd been expecting them. Scrubs, ponytail, gloves already on. Not rushed, not startled. "Table now," she said. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Marcus and Rodriguez lifted Wilson onto the central table. Before either of them could speak again, she was already cutting fabric away, exposing the wound with clinical precision. No hesitation, no flinch. "What's his blood type?" "O positive," Marcus answered automatically. "Good." She had the IV in before he finished the word. Something tightened in Marcus's chest, not fear, recognition. Her hands moved like this wasn't new, like this wasn't chaos, like she'd done this under worse conditions than a tent in the desert. She cleaned the wound, her fingers steady, her breathing even. Wilson groaned. She adjusted medication without looking at him. "Bullet went through clean," she said. "Missed the artery, he's lucky." Lucky wasn't the word Marcus would have used. Alive, maybe, for now. She finally looked up. Green eyes sharp, alert. "What about you?" she asked, already assessing him. "It's nothing." She stepped closer anyway, tilting his chin with 2 fingers. Gentle, firm. "No, it's not." She sat him down before he could argue. The needle tugged at his skin as she stitched his forehead with clean, exact movements. Not rushed, not sloppy. Marcus watched her face instead of the needle. Most civilians shook during their first combat trauma. Hands trembled, voices cracked. This woman didn't shake at all. "You work here long?" he asked. "Few months." "Where'd you train?" A pause, just a breath. "Med school," she said, something like that. The answer slid past him too smoothly. When she finished, the stitches were perfect, too perfect. "Come back in a few days," she said. "I'll check it." "I appreciate it, Doc." "I'm not a doctor." That should have ended it. It didn't. Outside, Wilson was loaded for transport. Marcus lingered. Something pressed at the back of his mind. A shape he couldn't name yet. "You handled that like military medical," he said quietly. "I've seen it before." For half a second, her composure cracked. "Not fear. Calculation." "You pick things up," she replied. He nodded, pretending that satisfied him. It didn't. 3 days later, Marcus came back for the stitches. Officially. Unofficially, because silence had a way of gnawing at him when things didn't add up. She was restocking supplies when he entered. The same calm, the same awareness. She noticed him before he spoke. "Healing well," she said after examining him. "No infection." "Sarah," he said. Her hand stilled. I've worked with medics my whole career, he continued. You don't just pick up combat triage like that. She sat down slowly, as if deciding whether the ground beneath her was stable. My brother was a Marine, she said. 2 tour, he came back broken. The story flowed easily, too easily. Marcus listened. He respected the pain in it. He recognized the truth that lived there, but it wasn't the whole truth. You move like someone who's been under fire, he said, not someone who heard stories about it. Her eyes met his. What if, she said softly, sometimes people serve best when no one knows they're serving at all. Before he could answer, Rodriguez stumbled in bleeding, swearing under his breath. She was on her feet instantly. As she rolled up her sleeves, Marcus saw it. A tattoo. Small, discreet, and unmistakable. His breath caught. He didn't say anything then. He watched, learned, noted the way she scanned the room, positioned herself, controlled the space. This wasn't a civilian. This was an operator. And whatever she was hiding, it wasn't about pride. It was about survival. Because some identities weren't meant to be known. And some sacrifices weren't meant to be seen. Sometimes dignity doesn't announce itself. It just works quietly, while the world keeps breathing because of it. Why did the sirens start screaming before dawn, on the one morning she wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the fight? Marcus was already awake when the alarm tore through the base, not because of the noise, but because years in uniform had trained his body to expect disaster before it arrived. He was pulling on his boots before the second wail finished echoing off the concrete walls. Outside, floodlights snapped on, shadows ran, voices sharpened. Something had gone wrong, badly. By the time Marcus reached the briefing room, the air felt heavier than usual. Maps were already projected on the wall. Red markers clustered too close together, too messy, too fast. Lieutenant Commander Hayes stood at the front, jaw tight, helmet under one arm. Delta team is pinned, Hayes said. No preamble, no easing in. High-value extraction went sideways, compound surrounded, heavy casualties. Marcus's stomach sank. How long? Someone asked. Too long. Hayes clicked the remote. Satellite imagery shifted. A cluster of stone buildings nestled into jagged terrain. High ground everywhere. Bad angles, worse exits. They've got wounded, Hayes continued. Multiple, and he hesitated just a fraction. They had embedded medical support. Marcus felt it then. That cold, unmistakable certainty. A woman. Status? Marcus asked. Hayes exhaled. Unknown. Last transmission said she was hit but still moving. Marcus didn't look at anyone. He didn't need to. Every sound in the room seemed to fade except the echo of a calm voice in a medical tent. Table now. We wheels up in 10, Hayes said. Objective is extraction, priority on wounded and the medic. The medic. The helicopter ride was rough. Wind clawed at the aircraft, tossing it like something disposable. No one spoke. They checked weapons, rechecked straps, focused on the work ahead. Marcus stared out at the mountains as dawn cracked the horizon open with pale orange light. Somewhere down there, someone was bleeding. Someone was holding a line they were never supposed to fight on. He hated that familiar ache in his chest, the one that came when things stopped being abstract. LZ is hot, the pilot called. 30 seconds. They hit the ground running. Gunfire snapped through the air, sharp and close, too close. Marcus dropped behind a boulder, returned fire without thinking. The noise became everything. The world narrowed to angles, movement, breath. They advanced in coordinated bursts, pulling enemy attention away from the compound. It worked, but barely. Marcus could hear the panic in the radio traffic. Delta was running on fumes. Move, Hayes signaled. They pushed hard, fast, violent, necessary. When Marcus reached the compound wall, he vaulted over and landed in chaos. Smoke, blood, shattered stone. And her. She was crouched behind a half-collapsed doorway, one arm pressed to her shoulder, uniform dark with blood that wasn't all hers. Her face was pale, dirt-streaked, but her eyes were clear. Focused. Alive. She didn't look surprised to see him. "About time," she said, voice rough but steady. Relief hit Marcus like a physical blow. He swallowed it down. "How many?" he asked. "4 wounded, 1 critical. I stabilized him, but we need evac now." She tried to stand. Her leg buckled. Marcus caught her without thinking. For just a second, she let the weight fall into him. Then she straightened. "I'm fine." He didn't argue. There was no time. They moved the wounded first. She worked even as they carried them, checking airways, adjusting pressure, murmuring calm instructions that cut through the gunfire like something sacred. When the helicopter finally lifted off, the cabin was a blur of hands and blood and shouted vitals. She collapsed into a seat, only once everyone else was secure. That was when she went still. Marcus noticed it immediately. Her breathing changed, shallow, uneven. Blood soaked through the dressing on her shoulder. Another stain bloomed along her thigh. "Hey," he said quietly, "stay with us." Her eyes fluttered, focused on his face for a second. "Do," she murmured, "let them see." "See what?" She slipped into unconsciousness before he could ask. At the hospital, everything moved fast. Doors swung open. She was gone from his sight in seconds, swallowed by fluorescent light and urgency. Marcus waited. Hours passed. The Delta operators stabilized. One coded came back, barely. Finally, Hayes appeared beside him in the corridor. "She made it through surgery," Hayes said. Marcus exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. "There's something you need to know," Hayes added. His voice dropped. "And this conversation never leaves this hallway." Marcus nodded. "That medic you pulled out, her name isn't Sarah Mitchell." Marcus didn't react. He'd already known that. "Captain Sarah Elizabeth Chen, United States Air Force, pararescue." The words settled heavy. "She was deep cover," Hayes continued. "Embedded medical support for classified operations. Her presence here was never supposed to be visible." Marcus leaned back against the wall. All the pieces slid into place. The skill, the silence, the restraint. "She saved those operators," Marcus said. "Yes," Hayes replied. "And she did it while wounded under fire with improvised tools." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. "And now?" Hayes's expression hardened. "Her cover's blown. That life is over." 3 days later, Marcus returned to the medical tent. She was sitting upright now, arm in a sling, leg bandaged, posture still impossibly composed for someone who'd nearly died. "You shouldn't be here," she said as he entered. "Probably not," he replied, "but I wanted to say thank you." She studied him for a long moment. "For what?" "For not quitting," he said. "For staying quiet. For doing the job when no one was watching." Her gaze softened just slightly. "That was the easy part," she said. "The hard part is stopping." She looked toward the mountains beyond the tent. "Some people only know how to serve by disappearing into it." Marcus nodded. He understood that better than he wanted to admit. Because sometimes the bravest thing isn't pulling the trigger. Sometimes it's carrying the weight in silence and letting the world believe you were never there at all. Why did the base feel quieter the moment she stopped pretending to be invisible? Marcus noticed it before anyone else said it out loud. The medical tent still stood in the same place. Same canvas, same dust, same antiseptic smell fighting a losing battle against heat and blood, but something had shifted. She wasn't hiding anymore. Not openly revealed, not announced, just no longer shrinking. She moved slower now, injuries forcing patience into someone who'd never needed it before. Her arm stayed tucked in a sling. Her leg made her favor one side, but her eyes, those stayed sharp, always counting, always listening. The men noticed, they didn't know why. They just felt it. When she stepped into the tent each morning, conversations lowered, jokes cut short. It wasn't fear, it was instinct. The kind that told trained men they were standing near someone who had seen things they hadn't. Marcus sat outside one afternoon, cleaning his rifle more out of habit than necessity. He watched her through the tent opening as she worked with another medic, guiding, not commanding, teaching without drawing attention. She was good at that, making herself smaller than her impact. "You're starring," she said without looking up. He smiled faintly, wasn't trying to. She finished wrapping a soldier's hand and dismissed him. Only then did she turn to Marcus. "Command told you," she said, "not a question." "Yes. Everything. Enough." She nodded, accepting that line without pushing. That was new, or maybe it had always been there. "They're sending me stateside," she said after a moment. Marcus felt the words land heavier than expected. "When?" "Soon, paperwork's already moving." "And how do you feel about that?" She considered the question, longer than she needed to. "Like I'm being unmade," she said quietly. Marcus didn't respond right away. There were some truths you didn't rush. "That identity," she continued, "kept people alive. Letting it die feels wrong." "But you're alive," he said. "That counts for something." She smiled without humor. "Does it?" That night, Marcus dreamed of mountains closing in, of radios that wouldn't answer, of hands that kept working even as blood soaked through gloves. He woke before dawn to shouting. Not alarms this time, voices sharp, urgent. A convoy had been hit on the eastern road. IED, small arms fire, 2 wounded inbound. Marcus was on his feet before he realized he'd moved. When the truck screeched to a halt outside the tent, she was already there. Not running, not panicking. Waiting. The wounded were rushed inside. One with shrapnel embedded deep in his abdomen, the other barely conscious, chest rising unevenly. The younger medic froze. "Pressure first," she said calmly. "Breathe, I've got him." "But command said," the medic started. She met his eyes. "He'll bleed out in 3 minutes," she said. "Decide fast." The medic stepped aside. Marcus watched her work one-handed, pain written into the tightness of her jaw but never her hands. She guided the medic through procedures far beyond his training, correcting gently, efficiently. When it was over, the soldier lived. Barely. Outside, Marcus caught her leaning against a crate, breathing hard. "You weren't cleared for that," he said. She didn't look at him. He wasn't cleared to die. That night, command called her in. Closed door, raised voices. Words like liability and exposure floated through thin walls. When she came out, her face was composed, too composed. "It's done," she said. "I leave tomorrow." Marcus nodded. "I'm sorry." She shook her head. "Don't be. This was always temporary." "Was it?" She didn't answer. The next morning, the base gathered without realizing they were gathering. Men stood nearby pretending to be busy, watching, waiting. She carried her bag herself. No ceremony, no salutes. Marcus walked her to the transport. "Do you regret it?" he asked. She stopped at the ramp and turned to him. "No," she said. "I regret that the world only sees noise." Then she surprised him. She extended her hand. He took it. Her grip was firm, steady, real. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing me." The transport lifted off in a cloud of dust. And just like that, she was gone. Weeks later, Marcus sat alone, listening to the desert breathe. He thought about how easily people erase the quiet ones, how service without spectacle faded faster than gunfire. Some people saved lives loudly. Others did it so well that no one ever knew they were there. And maybe that was the point. Because not all strength needs a witness. Sometimes the bravest souls leave no footprints. Only people who get to walk home because of them. Why did Marcus feel the mission briefing tighten his chest when her name wasn't even on the board? The room smelled like burnt coffee and recycled air. Screens glowed. Maps shifted. Red and blue markers slid across terrain that had never cared about intentions. Marcus stood at the back, arms crossed, listening. This one was different. High-altitude insertion, narrow extraction window, intelligence thin enough to make everyone uneasy. The kind of mission where mistakes didn't get second chances. And medical support, someone asked. A pause. Standard kit, the officer replied. Embedded medic from battalion. Marcus felt it then, the absence. No quiet confidence. No watchful eyes. No steady hands that could cut through panic like silence through noise. The helicopter ride out felt longer than usual. The mountains rose beneath them, jagged and indifferent. The air thinned. Radios crackled with static that refused to clear. They hit the ground under a pale sky, cold, wind biting through layers. Everything went wrong fast. The team moved toward the objective when the first shot rang out, too close, too accurate. They scattered for cover, returned fire. Dirt and stone exploded around them. Then the blast. Marcus didn't remember hitting the ground, just the sudden weightlessness, followed by pain that took his breath away. Someone was screaming. It took him a moment to realize it was him. Shrapnel tore into his side, not fatal but bad, enough to slow him, enough to change everything. The embedded medic crawled toward him, hands shaking. I need light, the medic said. I can't see where it's bleeding from. Marcus clenched his jaw. This was where she would have been calm. This was where she would have known. They got him stabilized enough to move, but every step was heavier than the last. Blood soaked his gear. His thoughts blurred. Extraction came late. Too late for one of them. Back at base, Marcus sat alone on a cot, sides stitched, ribs aching. He stared at the canvas ceiling as if it might offer answers. He kept thinking the same thing. She would have saved him. That thought scared him more than the pain. Because it meant he'd started measuring survival against a person instead of a system. 2 days later, an envelope appeared on his bunk. No return address. Inside, one folded sheet of paper. Marcus, you were right about one thing. Identities end, purpose doesn't. I heard about the mission. I'm sorry you had to feel that gap. It's a hard thing to realize how much quiet mattered only after it's gone. I'm stateside now, hospital corridors instead of dust, fluorescent lights instead of moonlight. It should feel easier. It doesn't. I still wake up counting breaths that aren't there. I don't miss the danger, I miss the clarity. Take care of yourself. Don't let the noise convince you that only loud things save lives. Yes. Marcus folded the letter carefully, tucked it into his kit. Weeks passed. Missions blurred together, wins, losses, names carved into memory. But something had shifted in him. He spoke up more during briefings, questioned assumptions, pushed for better preparation, better care. Not louder. Clearer. One evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains, Marcus stood at the edge of the base watching shadows stretch long. He realized something then. She hadn't left a hole. She left a standard. And standards didn't disappear when people did. They stayed. They asked things of you. They demanded better. Some people serve once and leave quietly. Others stay by changing the people who remain. And maybe that was her real mission all along. not to be remembered, but to make sure others never forgot what quiet excellence looked like. Why did Marcus hesitate when the call came, when every instinct told him to move, but something deeper told him to wait? The radio crackled once, then again. A voice he didn't recognize spoke his name with the kind of precision that stripped emotion from syllables. "Sergeant Rivera, you're requested at command now." No urgency, no explanation. Those were the calls that mattered most. The room was smaller than he expected. No windows, one table, one screen, one man in civilian clothes who didn't bother to introduce himself. "Sit," the man said. Marcus did. A photo appeared on the screen. Sorry. Older than the last time he'd seen her, hair shorter, eyes the same. Alive. Marcus felt his breath catch before he could stop it. "She's in trouble," Marcus said. The man studied him. "You're confident." "I know the look." The screen shifted. Maps, timelines, redacted blocks that told their own story by what they hid. "She's volunteered for a non-combat advisory role overseas," the man said. "Medical training, humanitarian cover." "That's not her," Marcus replied. The man almost smiled. "It never is." The truth came in pieces, controlled, measured. Her hospital assignment hadn't lasted. Too quiet, too clean, too removed. She'd requested reassignment not to fight but to prepare others to survive. The problem wasn't the role. It was the place. A region where lines blurred, where advisors became targets, where uniforms didn't protect you. "She went missing 12 hours ago," the man said. Marcus didn't hesitate this time. "I want in." The man leaned back. "You're not her handler." "I'm someone she trusts." Silence stretched. Finally, the man nodded once. "You'll move with a small team, off the books." This conversation never happened. The flight was long, quiet, purposeful. No bravado, no speeches. Just men checking gear and women staring at nothing while thinking about everything. They found the village at dawn. Empty. Too empty. Medical supplies scattered, doors open, no bodies, no blood. Hope and dread twisted together. They tracked movement into the hills. A compound hidden by trees, guards, improvised defenses, sloppy but desperate. Marcus led the approach. They breached fast. Inside, chaos. Civilians, confusion, fear. And in the far room, sorry, sitting on the floor, hands zip-tied, bruised, tired. But alive. She looked up when he entered. Of course she did. "Took you long enough," she said hoarsely. He crouched in front of her, cutting the ties. "You weren't supposed to be here," she said. "Neither were you." Outside, the team secured the area. No firefight, no heroics. Just extraction. On the helicopter, she leaned back, eyes closed. "Did they send you?" she asked. "They asked," Marcus replied. "I answered." She smiled faintly. "You never did learn to ignore quiet signals." "No," he said. "I learned to listen to them." Back at the staging base, doctors cleared her. Dehydrated, exhausted, bruised but intact. They sat together outside as night settled in. "I thought I was done," she admitted. "I thought I could help without disappearing again." And she stared at the stars. Turns out the world still needs people willing to stand where no one's watching. Marcus nodded. "So what now?" She breathed in slowly. "Now I choose how to serve, without erasing myself." He watched her face as she said it, saw the weight lift just slightly. Sometimes rescue didn't look like gunfire. Sometimes it looked like reminding someone they were allowed to exist outside the shadows. And sometimes the hardest missions weren't about survival. They were about coming back whole. Why did the silence feel heavier than the gunfire ever had? now that there was nothing left to hide behind. The airfield was quiet in the way only endings were. No alarms, no shouted orders, just engines humming low, waiting for permission to leave. Marcus stood a few steps back as she signed the final clipboard, her handwriting steady despite everything that had passed through her hands. No aliases this time. No borrowed name. Just her. She handed the pen back and slung her bag over her shoulder, smaller than before, lighter, or maybe it just looked that way because she was no longer carrying the weight of pretending to be invisible. "You don't owe them anything anymore," Marcus said. She nodded, "I know." Yet she didn't move toward the aircraft right away. They stood there together, watching the sun push itself above the horizon, pale light spilling across concrete and dust. For a moment, it looked like every other beginning they'd ever witnessed. But this one wasn't operational. It was personal. "I used to think service meant endurance," she said quietly. "How much pain you could absorb without breaking, how long you could stay unseen and still matter." Marcus listened. He'd learned when not to interrupt her. "Now," she continued, "I think service is knowing when to stop disappearing." That landed harder than she knew. Marcus thought of all the people he'd served with who never learned that lesson. Men and women who vanished piece by piece until there was nothing left but rank and memory. "What will you do?" he asked. She smiled, not the guarded one she used to wear, but something softer, honest. "Teach, heal, be present, a pause, maybe live." The loudspeaker crackled, calling her flight. She turned to him then fully. "You were right from the start," she said, "about quiet, about seeing things others don't." He shook his head. "You're the one who taught me that." They stood there a second longer than necessary, not clinging, not rushing, just letting the moment exist without needing to name it. She stepped forward and hugged him. Brief, strong, real. "Take care of them," she said, "the ones who don't know how to speak yet." "I will." She walked away without looking back. Marcus stayed until the aircraft lifted into the sky and became just another shape dissolving into distance. Weeks later, he found himself back in a briefing room. Different mission, different faces, same maps. But something had changed. When the junior medic spoke, hesitant and uncertain, Marcus waited, gave space, let the quiet do its work. When assumptions crept in, he questioned them, calmly, precisely. Not louder. Clearer. Later, alone, he sat on his bunk and reread a message on his phone. A photo of a hospital corridor bathed in sunlight, a caption beneath it. "Still serving, just differently." He smiled. The world would never know her real story. There would be no medals pinned for the nights she kept breathing for others, no headlines for the lives saved in silence. And somehow that felt right. Because dignity didn't need applause. It didn't need witnesses. It didn't even need to be remembered. Sometimes dignity was simply choosing to act, quietly, fully, and without needing permission to be seen.